All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Figma in the File series. Today's session is going to be building a design system for designers. My name is Chad. I am a designer advocate here at Figma. It means I get to work with all of you out there in the community. I'm sharing tips, best practices, content and material around Figma, as well as learning from all of you on how you're using Figma. And today I'm joined by Lauren Duxbury and Julie Lee, both from Honeywell. And they are right here on the screen as well. I'm going to pass it to each of them to say hello real quick here and tell you a little bit about themselves.
Hi everybody. I'm Lauren Duxbury. I was born in South Africa and I grew up there, and now I live in Atlanta, Georgia, where I work at Honeywell, and I've been there for 2 years. I am working as a UX designer and a product manager on their Forge UI design system team. And now I'll pass this to Julie.
Yeah, hello, I'm Julie. I didn't know we were sharing where we're from. I'm from Korea. I've been with Honeywell for 2 years. We started about like the same day. I'm a product designer on the design system team.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So Lauren and Julie, they're going to share more of their story today on creating a design system for designers. And before we pass it off to them to share all of their awesome content with you today, just want to let everyone know that today's session, it is being recorded and we'll have this available on the Figma YouTube channel. If you have questions throughout, please use the Q&A button. We will answer some of those questions as we go. Some of the questions we may save until the end, where we will do a bit of a dedicated Q&A time. If you have questions in the chat, want to say hello, give a shout out on a great point that really resonates with you. Please use the chat to make sure it's set to chat with everyone. And most importantly, we ask that you please be kind. We're all about just being kind and inclusive here at Figma. If you have questions, please check out figma.com/code of conduct. And with that, I am excited to pass it over to Lauren and Julie to share a bit more about their design system at Honeywell.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I've really been enjoying reading where everybody is from. I saw somebody was from Portugal. I went there a couple of years ago and I had the most amazing time. I want to go back. So shout out to the person from Portugal. Yeah, before Julie and I get started, I really wanted to get into the details about, before we get into the details about the design system, I really wanted to introduce you to what Honeywell is and kind of what industry we're working in. So a lot of you who've heard of Honeywell might think about thermostats or air conditioning filters, but Honeywell is actually a really massive company and they service a vast array of industries, everything from aerospace to healthcare to manufacturing, and they're doing amazing things. They work on flying cars, they're creating quantum computers. And if you think about your house and some of the smart devices you might have in your home, like you might have a Nest doorbell or a Samsung smart fridge, and think about how you can manage that through your phone or through your Alexa device. And think about all these smart appliances. Honeywell's actually doing the same thing. They're creating industrial hardware that's smart and it's connected. And over the years, all of these different divisions of Honeywell, whether it be in the industrial space or in aero, have been creating software for their customers so that they can manage all these smart devices. And this software, as it's been getting built over the years, has started to look and act and feel like it was from all different brands.
So back in like 2018, Honeywell formed Honeywell Connected Enterprise, also known as HCE. And the main goal of this organization was to bring Honeywell's software products together under one brand, so it can start producing cohesive customer experiences and drive innovation in the industrial software space. To achieve this main goal and this vision, Honeywell Connected Enterprise needed consistent and modern UI while incorporating global standards in inclusive and accessible design. And the only way to achieve that goal was to revamp or almost reestablish a new design and brand guidelines.
Yeah, so if you think about the whole goal of HCE was to just take all these softwares and bring them together. And so we had an engineering director and our UX director, Eric Breyer. They conceived of this idea of creating a whole brand new design system that could cater to this. And so they got the budgets for a small dedicated team of 5 designers, 2 devs, and 1 researcher. So that included Julie and I. And we were all hired and we eagerly embarked on the journey of creating this new design system for this extremely complex global product space. And this design system has to service multiple product teams all over the world. And they're producing software that manages everything from maintaining the tallest building in the world to monitoring the parts inside an airplane. And so, like we said, when HCE was formed in 2018, we inherited actually some legacy design systems. And the problem was that some of the legacy design systems, they didn't always deliver in certain areas. They didn't have meaningful timely releases. So basically, their releases didn't really meet the complexity of the needs that the product teams had, and they weren't always on time. They didn't really cater to a healthy cross-functional collaboration between UX and engineering because the tools weren't really providing the way in which to speak the same language. And then there wasn't really reliable collaboration between the core teams, so the team building the design system, and then the partner product teams, so those teams consuming the design system. And so we heard a lot of negative feedback about those legacy design systems. And what we really found from that feedback was it was kind of a result of 2 main things. There was a lack of a core design system team. So because there were these transient designers and engineers, they didn't have a good rapport. And then because they weren't all working together on the same product at the same time, they didn't always have a shared goal. And then this lack of attention and their transience also led to the fact that they couldn't focus on their product. And if they couldn't focus on that product, they couldn't focus on their customer. And that led to poor customer service. And so that meant that their customers weren't really happy. And so when we set out to build this new design system, we knew we're not just building a UI library. We're not just building some components and releasing them. This isn't just about improving aesthetics and creating rules around icons and color styles. You know, we needed to make more meaningful promises to our customers and really start to gain their trust again. And so some of those promises were making sure we had a dedicated cross-functional team, making sure we were transparent, making sure we had fast releases and that contribution was easy, and just, yeah, healthy collaboration overall amongst everybody. So if you look at this diagram, it actually shows the complexity of Honeywell and how many users we have as the Forge UI design system team. So on our first layer of users, that's the product teams who work on platform products. So these are teams that build things like admin services. And then in our second layer of users, we have consumers of those platform products, as well as our design system. And they're the teams that work in industrial and warehouse and cyber and buildings. And they're the ones who are building the products for our end users, Honeywell's customers. And one of our main goals is to offer superior service to all levels of users, not just our end users. And so whenever Julie and I interview somebody to join the design system team, or we talk about what it's like to be on a design system team, we like to make sure that people are eager to take on all the roles that go along with being on a design system. Because if you look at this, you have to realize you're no longer just a designer. You're actually a service designer. You're in sales, you're in marketing, and you're in customer support. And so those other roles require a certain attitude and willingness that not everyone is always thrilled to embrace.
When you embark on such a scalable and extensible project, you really need to understand the service aspects that feed into the system's success. Like what we've said before, a design system isn't just a product, it is a service as well, because a design system only works when other teams actually adopt it. So if we were to achieve this healthy, strong ecosystem, we needed a smart method and a solid set of tools. So when we were planning to revamp our design system, we looked to other popular approaches to help us get started. We ran with Brad Frost's atomic design methodology because it made the most sense at the time. And it also allowed us to break down this monstrous, ginormous design system down to like a digestible and manageable bite size. And we started with our foundational elements like typography, shadows, and colors. Then those elements go into each small component like a button. Then those small components are combined to form molecules like dropdown. Larger components are called like organisms, such as headers, and they are built with those smaller components like atoms and molecules. The idea is that all of the components can then be compiled like Lego blocks to create pre-built templates and or even like entire experiences like login flows or notification workflows.
Yeah, and when we look back on this now, we became a little too attached to this approach and a little too obsessed with this methodology. And we started letting this methodology run our entire process. And we started to try and explain everything through this lens. And it didn't click with everybody. Not a lot of people understood the analogy. We had to explain it a lot. And we pushed it way too hard. And we actually started selling atomic design rather than our system.
Yeah, and it got to a point where we lost our track and started to confuse our own customers, like our designers and developers and PMs, because we were breaking things down and said things like a helper text or input field label was also a component to fit into this atomic design model.
Yeah, so, needless to say, I mean, you can all look back in hindsight now and say that wasn't the best approach, but it did help us break down what we were doing, and it did help us plan. And so next came the tooling discussion. So like I said, we had some legacy design systems and they were built in Sketch. And so our designers were hesitant, to say the least, to try a new tool. They were really used to the Sketch ecosystem. They liked the plugins. They liked, how it was working for them. And so also, when you work in a big company like Honeywell, you also have to realize how hard it is to get new tools. It can sometimes take months to get new tools approved. And so the problem with Sketch, though, when you're thinking about a design system and libraries you're publishing out to multiple people across the world, and you're trying to have them all have the same files at the same time, is that it didn't offer any cloud services. And Sketch at the time didn't have Sketch Cloud. And so on its own, it didn't allow us to deliver on our promises, which included that cross-functional collaboration with devs, so inspect tools, things like that, and smoother governance. And so then we introduced Abstract. And so in order to collaborate with our designers on a global scale, because we had designers in Israel, we had designers in India, China, we had designers on the West Coast, Australia, we needed to introduce this functionality through a plugin or an additional tool. And for that purpose, we used Abstract. And Abstract promised to deliver collaboration elements, versioning, inspect tools, and all these amazing cloud services. And we were like, okay, cool, this is awesome. This is all we need. This is going to be super easy, and voila, we don't have to do anything else. It was almost too good to be true.
And then once we began to actually build our stuff, we encountered some weaknesses in the tools. And it first started out with prototyping. Since we were using Sketch, micro animations and any prototyping work had to be done in InVision, along with third-party plugins to be used between Sketch and InVision. Then InVision had its own limits on prototyping. So some of the designers from the core team and designers consuming the system began seeking out other tools to create more realistic and extensive prototypes like Adobe XD. Then we kind of really started to diverge and had design files all over the place. And we had to make sure we provide multiple links in Confluence for documentation or in like Jira tickets. Also in Teams when we're in group chats to make sure we were directing our cross-functional teams to quote unquote right places. Then Mira was introduced to us for like brainstorming and like research purposes, and things just got worse.
Yeah, so as you can imagine, the result of all of this was a little bit stressful because now you don't have any single source of truth. And that's kind of the whole point of a design system. So designers on the core team and product teams were using and managing designs across multiple softwares and multiple files.
Then it ended up having designers recreating their own instances of design systems, such as in like Adobe XD, to achieve the level of prototyping and collaboration they desired. And this completely negated the concept of having the design system because now they were no longer linked to like a centralized library.
Yeah, and then you can just imagine, we've got PMs and engineers and designers all coming to these different tools. So now there's these steep learning curves because everyone's having to learn multiple different tools and become adept and master, at least 5 different tools just to create and share deliverables.
And because there were so many unique component instances, when the design system team made a small change in the system, it had massive downstream impact and made it harder for the design system team to manage and communicate all the changes. But even if Sketch and Abstract had been our only tools, we would still be like struggling because the branching and merging functionality was imperfect, that we lost some branches with our most recent work. And the files began to slow down a lot. And we found out that the larger the design files got, the slower the software became. And we even tried separating out this like ginormous design system file into different smaller files, but that didn't really resolve our issue. Then on top of that, when a designer was on a different version of Sketch or a different version of Abstract, all hell broke loose. Designer began losing hours worth of work, missing sprint deadlines. We were pulling all-nighters while biting down our nails and watch this sync loader just like spin and spin and spin on our screens.
Yeah, and earlier I talked about one of our promises being visibility. We were actually now really struggling to deliver on our promises because apart from anything else, we couldn't communicate properly. And our tools didn't allow us to communicate effectively. We couldn't communicate things through Sketch and Abstract. And so we were trying to send out emails and send out things on team channels. And these posts were often overlooked.
And then things just couldn't get any better because when COVID hit, we were all separated, working from home like everyone else. The sprint velocity and deadlines became very crucial. And the bad tooling definitely exacerbated the issue with the quality of design, while the quality of design was suffering. So we were no longer able to collaborate as a team like when we were in the office together, meaning that our design reviews were a bit more challenging than before, and our designs were anything but harmonious and systematic.
So to kind of put you in our headspace at the time, if you go to the doctor and they give you one of those pain scales, like to say you've hurt your ankle or something, and you're supposed to tell them where you're at, you were at severe. You were at the crying, red face, like really angry place. And, it was around this time that Julie really got fond of these angry panda gifts. They were kind of on repeat on a daily basis. And they kept us chipper, but yeah, we had some bad moments. I specifically remember a design review with my design director, and I'm trying to get sign off on Friday evening at 6 p.m. and Monday, next Tuesday, I've got a sprint deadline coming up, and I've got a ton of work to get reviewed, and all I saw during this review with my director was this spinning wheel of death, and it just kept going and going.
Yeah, I definitely remember that because I was in the review as well, and my hands were getting really sweaty as the wheel was spinning. So I was just like wondering like how you felt about that as a victim of the situation.
Yeah, it was embarrassing. It was really frustrating, and it was frustrating for him, and I just remember feeling really angry because it was so not worth it, because our tools weren't even amazing. So like, what are we even doing here? This is the golden era of UX. This is our time to shine. And there must be something better out there for us. And so the following week, I thought, I'm not going to complain about this anymore. You know, it's going on deaf ears. I need to actually show numbers. And so what I did was I started measuring my time on a tool called Toggle, and then I would measure how much time was spent on downtime, like waiting on Abstract to load a file, which would take an hour, redoing work because Abstract had lost a branch, all these kinds of things. How much am I troubleshooting and helping people just use Sketch and Abstract? And then I sent these charts to my manager and my director, and that's kind of when things really clicked. Like, okay, the designers aren't just complaining here. This is actually costing us a lot of money. And so that's when they said, okay, let's stop the bleeding.
And then I think after some time passed, after we've adjusted to this new work from home situation, the team conducted some interviews with the product designers to gather insights into their preferences for the design tools, because we just, couldn't take this any longer. We're literally like ripping our hairs out. So we also started chatting to other UX friends outside of Honeywell and other big companies to talk about what they were using at the time. So the core team and the product teams worked together to create this list of features that were important in our next tool for consideration. And Adobe XD was already being heavily utilized and was well liked amongst the Bangalore team, our India team. Their biggest concern was having a tool that didn't offer an offline mode because they often had this internet connectivity issue. And we also had a group of designers in the States that had previously used Figma and were very, very, very passionate about it. And sometimes they would get in trouble for using Figma because we were trying to make designers use just Sketch and Abstract. And then we also had another group of designers who were seeking a faster advanced prototyping tool. So they were really loving Axure. So after a lot of discussions and consideration, two contenders rose to the top, Figma and Adobe XD. XD was very popular with design leadership because it was already accounted for in the budget and included in our Adobe licensing. This was a huge consideration during this pandemic because budgets were being slashed. If we were to sell a new tool to leadership, we needed to ensure it really, really was bringing extra value. And the core team also needed the real-time collaboration because the work stream of design system were so codependent and tightly knitted.
Yeah, so after the core team completed an evaluation of those two tools, that was followed by an evaluation by the external team. So we picked people in the external teams to actually go in and create trial products in each tool. And then they could test things like creating vectors and the collaboration and the sharing, and then some of the advanced prototyping features. And I would say Figma really won out here because they did a really great job of supporting this whole evaluation process, and they helped us think through the more complicated scenarios and things like how do you set up specifically for a design system file, and how do you really test the capabilities of this tool versus just kind of doing a very basic test. And then the secondary layer of this as the core team is what we needed to do was really evaluate how learnable is this tool. And I would say we quickly saw that teams were able to adapt to the Figma environment much more easily than the XD environment. I think people that came from graphic design backgrounds and were already used to the Adobe environment preferred XD. But yeah, the thing that was common amongst both of them was that they supported both platforms, Windows and iOS operating systems, which was big. Because Honeywell has a lot of people that use Windows, and so we can't always rely on something that only caters to Mac users. I'd say where XD won out at the time was with its prototyping and interactions. They had states and auto animate and all of that. Obviously, Figma's brought that in now. And once again, Figma did an amazing job of communicating that was on the roadblock. So we weren't really worried about it because we knew it was coming. And then Figma totally won out on the inspect and the dev handoff tools that totally surpassed XD in that area. One thing I will say, if you are in a big enterprise organization like ours and you cater to really, really complex products that are really data heavy and rely on a lot of logic, this is something where we're not really seeing a great advancement in either XD or Figma. We're still struggling with that because a lot of our products are very data heavy and we actually need those kinds of advanced prototyping tools. So we're hoping Figma delivers that in the future. So yeah, so another part of the evaluation we did was an actual evaluation of migration. So how long is it going to take for us to move our files over, and how long will it take to migrate from Sketch specifically to a new tool? What's it going to be like to manually fix the components once they're migrated over? What happens to the vectors and the shadows? Do they come over correctly? No, they didn't. They did not. You know, what's going to happen with things that are connected to a central library, like our colors and our type styles? Are they going to still be linked? No, they did not come over linked. And so what we realized was that in this migration evaluation is that it helped us create a timeline for how long this was actually going to take. And it also helped us realize it's not a migration. It's more of a recreation of the libraries. And I think this was where our management started to step back and get a little bit reticent again. And then because they saw costs associated with the time and effort it was going to take. And it was really a tough pill to swallow for all the teams as well, because we had literally just asked them to all move over to our new Sketch libraries, and now we were asking them to move again. So it was a hard sell, but yeah, migration's a misnomer. It's a recreation if you really want to take advantage of Figma and really immerse yourself in the whole Figma environment, and something you really do need to factor into your cost and figure out how long it will really take for you to do it properly.
And to chime in, migrating a whole design system and migrating a product design file can be a little bit different. A design system may require multiple layers of work, such as like linking colors, styles, typography, and depending on like how big your design system, it can get even bigger. And you can also have like one component affecting the another, or having one component being nested into another. And this can lead to having quite a bit of design files in order for this design system to work as a whole ecosystem. While a product design file can have its own little world per file. So you can have like a page dedicated to master components without having to create multiple files like design system, and just like linking them together within one file. And this is just like purely out of my experience, because I also had a time when I was working on the cloud service product. So that's just 2 cents for that.
Thanks, Julie. Yeah.
Sorry. So for the last part of the tool evaluation, we had to consider the new tool at scale, and we learned it in a hard way. In the past, with other tools, we had so many frequent incidents where we were losing our work, like we've stated before. And I mean, at first, like we did not expect this to happen. I don't think anyone would. Second, we also never tested out tools beforehand with larger files and larger teams. And I mean larger teams as in a lot of people, and also having teams in different locations. So as we were having some publishing glitches and while we were losing our work, our product teams were getting impatient with us, and I'm sure they were sending angry panda gifs to each other whenever this happened. And when they were getting notifications on design system file about any updates and changes, they were a little bit confused because there was no clarity on these updates. So we knew we needed to test any new tools at scale and ensure teams from all over the world to test it out in their own environments, and also test out if it can better our communication between teams.
Yeah, so, once you do your own evaluation, if this is something you're embarking on, I'm sure you'll find your own things unique to you. But if you're ready and if you're looking to make the switch and you just need to kind of make the business pitch, I think we can help you a little bit about how to think about it. So the first thing for us that was totally easy sell, our CEO loves design, and so Q, her name's Q, and she already knew about Figma, so that was great. That was first easy sell for us, but not everybody has that, right? So you really need to start talking business, and the easy thing for us was the cost cutting. So like I said, we had over 5 design specific tools per designer, and we were now able to cut that down to 1. So that was around a cost savings of $500 per designer annually. So if you have a team of about 40 designers, that's going to be around $20,000 per year your design team is saving just on the designers licensings. And that's not even thinking about the view only or the limited access licenses you also have to provide for people to view your files. The other way you're saving on cost is because you're actually reducing time spent, because you're not using multiple tools and having to replicate work across multiple tools. And then the other way you're saving is because the cost of labor is really expensive. And when you have 4 different design tools that you're having to use, that's a lot of training on all these different tools.
And then for us, we made the argument that we could stay in one tool for all collaboration and peer review. The design system designers could collaborate more easily with other product designers, and the designers consuming the system had greater visibility into our files. So we were able to follow through with comments and resolve issues and bugs way faster. We even started chatting inside the files, so we were cutting out teams. And multiple designers could seamlessly work on the same file with no lags, as if we were in the office together. So this collaboration was not only just amongst designers, but also with our PMs, our developers, and our researchers. They were all able to come to one file that had all the wireframes and prototypes and everything, and allow them to leave comments directly.
Yeah, and I also think back, if I think about some of the problems of the time of using Sketch, when I said when you work at a big company like Honeywell, they often have these procurement teams to get your licenses. And so our Sketch and InVision licenses were very, very heavily controlled by the procurement teams. And at one stage, all like four or five design systems designers all lost their licenses at the same time without warning. And one of our designers was out of Sketch license for over a month. And so there I was sending emails to the procurement people and haggling about, this person's, let's just say she's $40 an hour, and now she's wasting time and she's not designing. That's already the cost in one day of one Sketch license, and you can't get these Sketch licenses. And so now I'm having arguments with procurement people, and that's like not my job. My job is to worry about Honeywell's customers. My job is to enjoy being a designer, enjoy using my tools and loving what I do. And by alleviating all these roadblocks and by taking away those conversations with a tool like Figma, where you control the licensing and you control the access and everything's under one roof and it's so simple, you're making just the whole environment for your designers better. And when your designers are happy, you retain your designers. And I think we all know at this moment in time, it's really important to think about retention in your teams and how you can keep your teams happy. So just kind of want to show you just a snapshot of our light scene here. This is not everything, of course. We've got a couple of themes and we've got a huge structure, but really what I want to end with, before we get into questions, is just to say, thanks to Figma, our design libraries have really evolved and matured this year. We have a trusted, controlled set of plugins versus all these weird plugins that are updating at different times. And we've been able to improve things like accessibility. They've got these amazing accessibility plugins to test for things like color blindness, and the collaboration features, commenting and live viewing, like I said, have given us that greater visibility and helping our teams communicate better. And they've just allowed us to share more easily with our partners. And we're conducting way healthier critiques and way healthier peer reviews.
And another feature that has really impacted us is the ability to publish assets individually. Even just like a couple of days ago, we wanted to fix a small thing on a component from the design system file, or we wanted to restructure a tooltip component. And we were able to make our changes and publish parts of the design system instead of republishing the whole file over and over. And controlling publishing on that level has been a game changer, and we actually plan to replicate that model with our engineering, versioning, and publishing. So that's another area we see maturity where design thinking tools and design processes are impacting our engineering team.
Yeah, and if you're at a point where you're still deciding on what tools to use, I really want to emphasize that you need to think about not just what's important for your core contributors, so the people on your design system team, but think about how the tool is going to impact all levels of your users and all types of users. And Figma might not have some of those advanced prototyping features we talked about, but where they lack there, we really feel like they're making up for in a sense of community, and the sense of community their tool fosters. And Figma has really allowed us to do so many more things so much more easily, inviting in contributors and reviewers, training UXers, even training non-UX people like PMs and researcher, non-designers. And Figma has been instrumental in driving our enhancements. Because of all of this transparency and how easy it is to contribute, we're now making enhancements so much faster. And for your design system to be healthy, you need to make enhancements quicker. And so, yeah, we're just creating this really solid environment and that ecosystem we're talking about, and able to mature our team as well. And so, yeah, as you embark on this journey, if you're thinking about it right now, just think about how your tool, no matter what you pick, even if it's not Figma, think about how it's going to impact all of your users, all those levels of users we talked about. Yeah, so that's kind of everything we have to say about our journey and how we chose Figma. And thank you so much for listening. And we're happy to dive into any questions or actually dive into the files if you all would like. Any final thoughts from you, Julie?
That was it.
Great.
Thank you so much, Lauren and Julie. A lot of great content there, and I know a lot of folks are excited about some of the learnings there. One thing that you said that I think is a really, really great point is that even in the beginning, when you were setting out to define your promises to teams, recognizing that building your design system, it wasn't just about creating components and rules, that it's really about that entire ecosystem on how to better enable designers across a worldwide company, right? So we actually had a question come in that I think really ties into that around, as you were defining those promises, which piece of that was the hardest to deliver on, and how did you work through finding a solution for the biggest challenge as a part of that?
Sorry, I have two little dogs in the back. I tried my best. I closed all the doors in the house. They're still going. For me, it's still hard. We haven't overcome it. I think it's a constant challenge. And I think if you're speaking to anybody in a design system and they're saying that isn't a challenge, I don't know how honest they're being with you, because everybody I've spoken to says governance is the most difficult part. I think it's like we said, communication is so big, and we're still struggling with that a little bit. I mean, not every designer is tapped in all the time and seeing what's going. They've got their own stuff going on. So even when we publish something, we can write notes, we can tell them exactly what's happened. They're not necessarily going to read it. They're sometimes just going to click out. So you still definitely want to try and have those multiple channels of communication to tell people what's changed. Something that I've learned really helps is having a lot of one-on-ones. So I have one-on-ones with all the designers, and they invite me to their reviews. So something that's really worked well is we can kind of spot patterns or spot things we need to work on before they've even asked for it, because we're invited to all their reviews. And so it does take time, and you really have to invest in that kind of one-on-one with them. But it's been really helpful, and it's really helped us mature. And once again, that's how Figma's helped us, because we can kind of just get quick access into all these files, and they can allow us in, and kind of we can maneuver around in there and comment, and it's really makes it seamless. But I think contribution is the hardest part. Teaching people how to design for a design system is a different way of thinking. but it's been really fun because when you invite people in to design for your design system, you help them think in a totally different way. And when they click,
Absolutely.
it's really cool because at first they're like, oh, this is so easy. I'm just going to create this component. And like, I don't know why you guys take so long and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, okay, okay. And then when they start, they realize, oh, this is quite complicated. You know, I have to think about all these little things and how do I structure this so it's nice to use. And then you also have to kind of retrain the brain a little bit because, like we said, it's service minded. So people are like, oh, well, I'm going to create it this way because that's easy for me. Or I'm going to create it this way because it's easier to update in the future for me. But it's a balance. You also have to make sure that that component works really well for someone. And how's it going to be the best for them? How are they not going to break it? How are they just going to be able to use it without you having to teach them how to use it all the time? So I don't know. What about you, Julie? What do you think? What's been the hardest thing for you to deliver on?
I think, yeah, I would agree. It's about teaching them how components are supposed to be used, but at the same time, for the design system team, we need to make sure that we give them enough flexibility, but also some guidelines or like rules around components. So I would agree with that. Sorry, Lauren. We have two Lauren, so that's why I'm so used to calling her Dux.
I love that. It's really when you get into building for a design system, it really does challenge you to think more holistically. You're not thinking about your singular, product feature or product area demo. You really do think about that impact as it goes across, all areas. And even as you have the underline on your slide here, your design system, it's a product and a service. Yes, I think that's, it's fantastic to think about. It's how you can help others through your promises, elevate, and just become more familiar with creating a design system for all. Awesome.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I just want to say, don't be scared to get involved in other people's products. I mean, sometimes I definitely get overwhelmed because our products are so different and solving such tough problems. They're very complex. But you really need to get in there with your designers and trust that they understand their problem space and trust that they're going to communicate it to you so you can really deliver to them.
Yeah. And the communication piece, saying that that's a huge part of it. Another question I think really ties into that is around, keeping folks who are in the cross-functional teams. How are you keeping them on the same page with the design system team as updates are happening, just so they know what's going on. Perhaps if they are also making contributions to the system, what does that communication tend to look like?
Yeah, it's tricky. Once again, if you're being service minded, you're kind of doing whatever they want. So it's a bit of a balancing act. Some designers want to hear about things on Teams. Some designers don't want to hear from you at all. They just want to get their updates and see what happens. Some designers want to have a lot of one-on-ones. I had some designers who didn't want to go and learn Figma on their own. They wanted kind of to be handheld. So I started doing like Figma Fridays or these sessions. And so it really just depends on the individual, I'd say. And you need to be flexible with that because everybody learns differently. Everybody learns at a different pace and everybody consumes information differently. And we can't say it's a one size fits all. You could have a perfect communication strategy, which we don't. I'll be the first to admit that we're figuring that one out. But it doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody, just like some people like to consume their news through Twitter and other people like to consume their news through BBC. Everybody's different.
Yeah. Awesome. So another question, I love that you talked about how when you were first building everything out, really following a lot of the atomic design methodology. And, we see that with lots and lots of different teams. Everyone really will reference that with their initial approaches. And we had a question come in and I thought it was really, you started to touch on it where you got to a point of realizing that you were selling more of atomic design than you really were your process and how you were looking to build your governance model and, you know, you drive your adoption, you know, how long was it really till you kind of backtracked? You know, did it cause you to have to kind of restructure, redirect any of your goals or promises along the way?
Yes, it dawned on me that we were becoming too obsessed when we were trying to look at the information architecture of our documentation. And one of the PMs in our company had asked us to help her better understand this again, to restructure our components under molecules, organisms, templates, and atoms. And this other designer and I were like, why would we put our components in that structure? That makes no sense. And she's like, oh no, but this is the way you guys are talking about it. Shouldn't you make everything seamless so we can understand? And then that's when I realized we've gone way too deep with this. We've been talking about this atomic design way too much. And then the other way we realized was that when we started bringing everything together, like Julie talked about, we're all working apart. It's hard to communicate with everybody at home during COVID. We started bringing everything together and it all looked discordant because we were working in sprints and working on these neatly separated components, and then they weren't coming together well. And that's when we realized that, oh, this has been kind of detrimental. And then the other thing we did was we were actually having dev build in this order versus the way that maybe they would have liked to build. And that's kind of more of a waterfall approach. And it wasn't giving our other product teams what they wanted fast enough. They didn't want things in this order. They wanted things in bigger chunks so that they could start using the design system.
You just spoke to a great point there, you know, around how it's built out on the code side of things. And, you know, as you're doing your migrations and, you know, wonder if you could share a little bit about what that collaboration looked like with the engineering teams as your assets were being created.
Yeah, so we have a pretty unique situation, just to be completely transparent. We actually, I would say this atomic design approach was so harmful that our engineers got taken away because we weren't building fast enough and we weren't delivering to teams fast enough. So what happened is they put a hold on the engineering side of things. We got up to molecules and then they put a hold on it. And so now what we're doing is reskinning one of our old design system components. Sorry, not components, the library. We're reskinning it with our new design system. And so what's been hard there, as we were migrating, the engineers didn't know where to look. Should we go to Figma? Should we go to Confluence where the documentation is? Should we go back to Abstract and Sketch? That was tricky because we also had a product team that was really heavily relying on us. And so we were trying to migrate and really partner with them at the same time while they were reskinning this old design system. So that was tough. I wouldn't say that was an easy process, but the engineers are really, really enjoying Figma and the inspect tools there. We're finding that before, engineers preferred going to Confluence, which designers hated using. And then they might also have preferred going and getting really, really fleshed out documentation in Miro. And now they don't feel like they need those tools anymore. They just go to Figma. So as we've kind of neatened things up and streamlined things, they've been enjoying the inspect tools a lot.
Awesome. So another piece that we touched on, there's a question that folks had around, you know, Honeywell, obviously large, very global organization. You know, any lessons that you've learned about how to build localization into your design system assets to provide for that global audience? You know, any tips or best practices that you've identified?
That's a great question and really timely. So we, I wouldn't say we're very advanced there. We're trying very hard to be, because it was kind of one of the tenets of our system. So we do think about how a component might resize. So definitely using order layout. So that, say, for instance, a language ran from right to left, or the words in the language were longer. You're making sure that those components can work in different directions and for longer strings. So that's kind of one of the more basic things we thought about. And then just recently I spoke to somebody in Honeywell, and he was telling me how amazing Figma has been for him and his team, because what they're doing is they're creating with the design system, they've created another kind of theme on top of that, which is all in Mandarin. And they're switching out libraries seamlessly using the library switcher, which I haven't actually tried yet using it. He was just telling me about it the other day. Yeah. So that I thought was really cool. I haven't actually watched the full demo of it, but it's really timely that you asked about that. And if anybody wants to know who that is, I can forward you his information and he'll be able to show you his demo.
Awesome. And I think also going along with the internationalization side, you briefly touched on some of your plugins, some of the accessibility side of things. I think that that's a question that we hear a lot from folks who are building out their design systems, and how can they factor in elements of accessibility into their assets, and whether that's just the library assets used, it's in their documentation, et cetera. Really, how have you approached the accessibility side? I know we've had a couple of questions come up around that. I think that's really timely around, even with internationalization and how accessibility is worldwide.
Yeah, I don't know. Can you all see this file?
Yeah.
Sure. So the great thing about Figma, which I really love and we touched on in our talk, was that you can set up these approved plugins if you're in a big organization like Honeywell, where there's like I said, they're quite strict about security and procurement, especially when it comes to intellectual property. And so you can set up these approved plugins. And so what we have is these really cool ones like colorblind. And what you can do with a plugin like that is take a whole component or a design and then actually render it to see people's different, what people with different types of colorblindness would see. And so that's an added layer of how we're trying to cater to people with different types of needs. It's not necessarily part of WCAG guidelines or something that we have to do, but we are being really careful about that. Julie, I don't know if you want to add to that at all about how we're catering to accessibility through Figma, if you have anything.
Through Figma, I don't really know anything other than plugins, but we have like our dedicated accessibility researcher. So she's basically our guidance in accessibility. So outside of Figma, it's more like working with her and doing our own research before creating our components, such as like checking color contrast or like font sizes and things like that.
Yeah. One thing I will say is we don't really rely, they give us kind of a starting point, but we don't rely on plugins because there's things that are technically accessible. And then when you actually do the usability testing, we saw this a lot. Like we had a red and an orange, and the orange was this really dark amber, not necessarily something that we liked, but it was technically accessible. It had enough contrast. And it was fine. And the colorblind checker that I used, the plugin, everything was fine. But when we actually tested it with these users, even people that didn't have types of color blindness, they couldn't tell the difference between the red and the orange. And that might seem really silly to some designers, like say if you're just designing a music app or something like that. But at a company like Honeywell, if you're a pilot and you've got an iPad strapped to your leg, and it's going red, there's red stuff, it means something really bad is about to go down. And so you have to be really careful about how you use color. And obviously a pilot's not going to be colorblind, but there are other people in our user community that could be, like somebody that manages a factory or a large building. And if something's red and something's severe, they need to know, and they need to know now. And they can't think it's just orange or green, because it's important.
Awesome. Well, Lauren and Julie, I really want to thank you so much for sharing, more about your process and how you were able to take your design system and better tailor this for designers. That entire process really speaks to how design systems have so many different pieces to it. It's really that iceberg, right? There's so much underneath the surface there. And it's really, really great to hear about how you approach that.
Thank you. Yeah, great.
So much.
Awesome. So thank you all so much for joining us today. Please check out figma.com/events, where you can see any future live streams that we have coming up. And if you have some suggestions or ideas, future content where you would love to see, please feel free to reach out to us at community@figma.com. Once again, Lauren and Julie, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing.
Thank you so much for having us. This was really fun, and goodbye to everybody.
Awesome. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.